Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone. In this occasion, we would like to present our topic today, which is about ethnographic approaches in sociolinguistics. The first speaker is Erlin Bintang Tricahya, and the second speaker is Fissilmi Dakhilah. Now, let's jump to the first slide. Ethnographic approaches in sociolinguistics. Ethnography is an approach to research the rules, cultural norms, and values that are intertwined with the language use. As Johnston 2004 also said that ethnography is the best explanation of human behavior that are particular and culturally relative rather than general and universal. Meanwhile, the ethnographic research is carried out through participant observation, or the first-hand observations of behavior in a group of people in their natural setting. So, in order to capture the first-hand language patterns and attitudes, the ethnographers, or people who conduct ethnographic research, they need to live for an extensive period of time in community they are studying. And they also try to provide accounts which show how the behavior that is being observed makes sense within the community that is being observed. Hence, the ethnographic research is more qualitative rather than quantitative. So there are three illustrative book lengths of ethnographic studies. The first one is from Scherzer, 1983. The second one is from Hill and Hill, 1986. And the third one is from Mendoza Denton, 2008. However, it is important to remember that these studies represent the result of lengthy and time-consuming ethnographic projects. It is also possible to do smaller scale studies using participant observation, like focusing on very specific types of interactions in a group and particular linguistic features. So now we're coming to the ethnography of communication. The goal of ethnography of communication is to study the communicative competence of a specific speech community by discovering and analyzing patterns of communication that organize the use of language in particular communicative activities. But what is communicative competence? Next. Communicative competence is sometimes used to describe the knowledge of how to use language in culturally appropriate ways. So, linguistic competence covers the speaker's ability not only to produce grammatically correct sentences, but also communicative competence, which is appropriately reflect the social norms governing behavior in specific encounters. In 1996, the Wildrook said that communicative competence extends to both knowledge and expectation of, first, who may or may not speak in certain settings, second, when to speak and when to remain silent, the third is whom one may speak to, and so on. In short, everything involving the use of language and other communicative dimensions in particular social settings. Things need to be considered in learning a language and how to speak. The first one varies from Himes 1972 said that children not only must learn how to construct sentences in that language, but also must acquire knowledge of a set of ways in which sentences are used. For example, like developing general theory of the appropriate speaking in their community, so that the students can be able to recognize, such as appropriate and inappropriate interrogative behavior, and so on. The second one, in learning to speak, we are also learn how to communicate in appropriate ways to the group in which we are doing that learning. It is also sometimes be called as language socialization. For example, there is a famous study which focuses on communicative competence, is found in Frick 1964. It outlines kinds of speech used in drinking encounters among the Subanon of the Philippines. In conclusion, communicative competence is a key component of social competence. Thus, it is also clearly not enough to merely be adept at the grammar of the language, but we also have to understand the social appropriateness of different constructions. Now, the next part is about speaking. Himes 1974 has proposed an ethnographic framework which takes into account the various factors that are involved in speaking. The word speaking here is actually as an acronym for the various factors that Himes deems to be relevant in understanding how particular communicative event achieves its objectives. So here are the 8 factors from speaking acronym. The first one, the letter S, stands for setting and scene. The second one, the letter P, it stands for participants. The letter E stands for ends. The letter A stands for act sequence. The letter K stands for key. The letter I stands for instrumentalities. The letter N stands for norms of interaction and interpretation. And the last one is the letter G, stand for genre. So the first factor is setting and scene. Setting refers to the time and place, while scene refers to the abstract psychological setting or the cultural definition of the occasion. The second factor is participants. It refers to the speaker listener or addresser addressee or sender receiver. The third factor is ends. It refers to the conventionally recognized and expected outcomes of an exchange as well as to the personal goals that participants seek to accomplish on particular occasions. The fourth factor is act sequence. It refers to the actual form and content of what is said. For example, like the precise words used, how they are used, and the relationship of what is said to the actual topic at hand. The fifth factor is key. It refers to the tone, manner, or spirit in which a particular message is conveyed. It also in form of like light-hearted, serious, precise, pedantic, mocking, sarcastic, and so on. The next factor is instrumentalities. It refers to the choice of channel, for example, like oral, written, signed, or telegraphic, and to the actual form of speech employed, such as language, dialect code, or register that is chosen. The next factor is norms of interaction and interpretation. It refers to the specific behaviors and properties that attach to speaking and also how those may be viewed by someone who does not share them. And for the last factor is genre. Genre refers to clearly demarcated types of utterance, such as poems, proverbs, riddles, prayers, lectures, and editorials. So, based on these 8 factors, Himes offers us in his speaking formula is a very necessarily reminder that talk is a complex activity and that any particular bit of talk is actually a piece of skilled work. The next section is ethnography and beyond. In more recent studies, the description of underlying communicative competence and actual language use are combined with critical perspectives and other forms of discourse analysis. For example, Dove 2002 looks at classroom interactions in a multi-ethnic Canadian high school classroom through ethnography of communication research while also adopting critical and post-structuralist theoretical stances in her analysis. So, from the analysis, which also includes information about students' achievement and attitudes stated in interviews with the researcher, provides a picture of the classroom interaction, which is much broader and more nuanced than a description of what occurred in the interactions. For example, some ESL English as a second language students, many of whom had Chinese parents or were themselves not born in Canada, participated less in classroom discourse, but were nevertheless high achieving and in many cases performed better academically than their classmates who were born in Canada and had English as their first language.
The next slide about ethnomethodology. Ethnomethodology is that branch of sociology which is concerned with the process and techniques that people use to interpret the world around them and to interact with the world. And the next about ethnomethodologies, it is interested in trying to discover the categories and systems that the people use in making sense of the world. Background knowledge as part of communication. We can hope to understand if we do not share certain background assumptions with those others. So, to interpret particular sentences or set of sentences, we have some knowledge of the categories the speaker find relevant. This knowledge of membership categorized device is socially accurate. It is also the kind of the knowledge in which ethnomethodologists are interested. And the next about common sense, knowledge, and practical reasoning. Common knowledge refers to a variety of the things. It is the understandings, recipes, maxims, and definitions that we employ in daily living as we go about doing things. So, these types helps us to classify and categorize what is out there and guide us in interpreting what happened out there. This stock of common sense knowledge is acquired through experience, but since Each person's experience is different from that of everyone else. The knowledge varies from person to person. And the next about practical reaction refers to the way in which people make use of their common sense knowledge and to how they employ that knowledge in their product of everyday life. What they assume, what they ever question, how they select matters to deal with, and how they make the various bits and pieces of conventions maintain normal appearances. Linguistic ethnography. In recent years, linguistic ethnography has emerged as a global trend for research which links ethnography research on ideologies and withers societal norms with the analysis of specific language practices. This is methodological tenet of linguistic ethnography. The first one is the context for communication should be investigated rather than assumed. That meaning takes shape within specific social relations, interactional history, and institutional regimens. And the next is analysis of the internal organization of the verb and other kinds of semiotic data is essential to understand its significance and position in the word. That means it's far more than just the expression of idea. And biography, identification, change and nuance are essential signals in the linguistic and textual fine grain. The next about hegemonic ideologies. How speakers position themselves with regards to such ideologies that it's we as researchers must discover how these ideologies are not only reproduced through language practices but also challenges through the performance of individual speakers or groups of speakers. And last about the goals of sociolinguistics are not merely to understand the tacit rules and norms of language use that are culturally specific but should encompass understanding how societies use language to contrast those very societies.
Well, I think that's all from our presentation today, which is about ethnographic approaches in sociolinguistics. Thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.